All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Before we dive in, I'm just going to go ahead and open up the chat so that we can all get to know each other a little bit. Feel free to drop in, let us know where you're joining us from. I'll give a quick introduction into myself and to our amazing panelists today. My name is Hannah Crapeau. I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at Certiport. We're happy that all of you are joining us for our 6th Certified Academy Design webinar today. Now, the session is being recorded, so you'll receive a full link to the recording after our presentation has wrapped today, which does mean that everyone here is on mute. So if you have questions that you want to address to our panelists, feel free to drop those either into the Q&A or the chat feature, and we'll make sure to address those as we go through our discussion today. I did want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for this session, the Intuit Design for Delight Innovator Certification. This program promotes creativity, critical thinking, complex problem solving, and other skills that are much needed and valued in today's workforce. And we'll, of course, be diving more deeply into design thinking throughout our session today and how design thinking provides learners and educators a practical framework exercising their creativity. And we have 2 incredible educator panelists and our certified ambassadors to boot to join us for this discussion. Our first panelist is Greg King. Greg is a computer-assisted design instructor at McCann Technical School in North Adams, Massachusetts. Prior to leaping into a teaching career, Greg was a senior mechanical designer and project manager for HVAC projects in both the design, build, and spec marketplace. Greg has been an Autodesk student and user since 1997, with a primary focus on AutoCAD and Revit. Outside of the classroom, Greg enjoys exploring the outdoors with his family and on rainy days, blissfully trying to find ways to thank his wife for allowing him to commandeer the dining room table with 3D printers, CNC machines, and laser engravers. Our second panelist is Katie Watchhorn. Katie is a digital business education, career, and technical education instructor at Sioux Area High School's Career Center. She discovered her passion for teaching while living in Italy, where she taught general business English, proofread scientific articles, edited CVs, advised on business presentations, designed email templates, and offered marketing services. She joined her alma mater in 2019 with the intention of helping students to discover what they really enjoy and what they want to do with their life. Throughout her professional career, Katie has worked within the marketing and sales sectors in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Milan, Italy for 7 years. Her objective is to inspire students by bringing her industry experience into the classroom. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that we can see our lovely panelists here. And before we dive into our discussion, I'll let them both introduce themselves. So Katie, we'll go ahead and start with you. Can you give us a quick introduction into you and the students that you work with?
Sure. Well, my name's Katie Watchhorn, and it's a privilege to be here. I'm from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, up here in the middle of the UP, and I teach CTE digital business. I also have 1 hour of computer science, and I love what I do. So as for my students, I certify in Adobe. So all of my first year students this year certified in Photoshop. I had a 92% pass rate, which was awesome. So we specialize in graphic design. I try to push Adobe with all of my students. I also offer quite a few other certifications involving Certiport. So we offer communication skills for business, entrepreneur and small business. I do offer a few vouchers for IT specialists, so I do keep that as an option, and Unity. So we have quite a few certifications. Long story short, I try to keep a really diversified portfolio available for my students because digital multimedia encompasses a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I just love to see them earn as many college credits and certs as they can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Katie. Greg, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hi, my name is Greg King, and again, very pleasure to be here again. So I work in North Adams, Massachusetts at McCann Technical School, which is a vocational technical high school. I'm a computer-assisted design instructor there, so I teach primarily 9th through 12th grade. We teach every aspect of CAD, including architectural engineering design, mechanical engineering design, and computer animation, including video game design. So our primary focus on certification is all of the Autodesk suite. So AutoCAD, Revit, Maya, Fusion 360, Inventor, the whole brevity of it all. The greatest thing about, I think, about being in a CAD creative environment is, we can design anything, and the kids absolutely just do design anything. So Very fortunate to be able to work in a school where we're 1 week on with them and then 1 week off when they go back to academics. So we have a lot of great opportunities to let their creativity go wild, and they never disappoint. So thanks for having me here today.
Love it. Thank you so much, Greg. And that's a great foray into the main topic of our conversation today about creativity. And we know that creativity, of course, spans all different types of career sectors, but is especially crucial for anyone working in the field of design. So I wanted to talk first about the creativity that you're both seeing in the classroom. So Greg, we'll start with you. What impresses you about your students' creativity that you see every day in the classroom?
Well, I think the greatest thing about, when you're faced with, 20 plus students staring back at you, it's important to kind of, be the guide on the side and let them be creative. And one thing that I've seen throughout the years is, kind of flips the mantra of, give an inch, take a mile. If you give them an inch, they will give you a mile. So their creativity is really only limited to what you limit them to. An example of that is, when I go through an architecture lesson, I ask, what is the idea of your dream house? And just think about it. I don't give them any prompts to that. And you're going to get 20 different answers, whether it's a beach house, a hunting cabin, whatever it may be. And I think what impressed me the most is that when they get talking about their dream houses, they start to elaborate on each other and really work together and collaborate without much prompting. So if you give them that responsibility to have creative freedom, they'll take that to a level that you can't teach that. You just have to let them do that. They already have it in them. You just have to unleash it.
I love that. I love that they already have this creative drive within them. And I like that you touched on collaboration as well, which I know we'll talk a little bit more about later. So thank you for that response. Katie, I wanted to come to you next. What has impressed you about your students' creativity?
I mean, I'm just thoroughly impressed around the board. I try to give, I think the key to letting my students' creativity shine is actually having, believe it or not, a little bit of structure. I think giving them guidelines and being like, this project, I want you to do this, but you have to maintain within these guidelines. I think that's key, because you want them to be creative, but you don't want them to focus on the creativity and not the assignment as a whole. So I love, once you give them guidelines and you say, this is what I want, and you allow them to research different examples of what they want. I think researching is key too, trying to discover exactly what you have in mind, then that's the most rewarding thing. So you give them a set of rules, then it's up to them how they interpret it. And that's what I love. And that's what I love with graphic design, because giving them all these different assignments throughout the year, it's really impressive to see what they come up with, whether it be a flyer or a poster or a brochure. You give them guidelines, you tell them what needs to be on it, and the rest is up to them. So, but I think it's key to teach them how to research and how to figure out what they want on it. I try not to show them exactly what I would do, because they tend to follow exactly what you do. So I tell them what I want, and then I let them run free with it. And I think that's really important.
I think that plays really well into the topic that we're discussing here today, is creating a framework around creativity, because there's creative exercises and there's lots of ways to be able to stretch kind of those creative muscles. But a lot of times there needs to be a framework around which to exercise that creativity, especially if we're talking about transitioning those skills into the workforce, because there's always going to be parameters around a project that students are designing for. So I wanted to talk about and think about the flip side of the coin. Where do we think that students could improve in exercising their creativity? So Katie, you've talked about a couple things, but I wanted to come to you first for your thoughts on where the students could improve around maybe that research or those guidelines that you've put into place.
I think students, a lot of times having like a blueprint, having an outline, and having them write out what they need to have on there, absolutely, and then forming the creativity around that. Because so many times it's not really a perfectionist thing, but sometimes students focus too much on one thing and they don't move on to the next step or other things that they need to do. And they find out they run out of time. So it's time management skills. And there's creativity, and I love to see it, but they also need to know how to budget their time and how to focus on the whole thing as a whole. And I sometimes feel like kids focus too much on one thing. We all do. And having, like you said, an outline, a frame, and having them go through the steps, step-by-step process of understanding what they need and having a blueprint, then they can take that and transition it to the whole piece.
Yeah.
And,
Well, I
yeah.
love that you touched on time management, because again, that's a crucial skill when it comes to entering the workforce. It's not just getting the project done, it's being able to do it in a time intensive way so that students are able to deliver something that encompasses all of the pieces that need to be included. And I know, Greg, we talked about in previous conversations about that attention and focus and being able to call out kind of all of those details. So I wanted to see if you have some similar thoughts or other ways that you think students could improve their creative skills.
Yeah, I've said it in previous webinars that, we're teaching the TikTok generation. If we don't catch them in the first 30 seconds, they're gone. And if we catch them, we only have them for 3 minutes. So we have to keep them engaged, keep them going. And that's one side of it. But in terms of, the design thinking aspect of it, like Katie said, sometimes they get stuck on that one topic and they just, they get tunnel vision on it. And sometimes it even goes the other way where they just have all these designs and they're just going crazy with them and they're not actually focusing on, the problem at hand, or, solving a customer's problem,
Sure.
feeling empathy and all that. So I think having, a well-established, brainstorming session, of finding out how to creatively, use multiple people in a creative way and in a positive way to come to a solution, but still harnessing in on what are we doing to solve the problem. I think that's an area that students can use a big boost on, mainly because they're used to getting instant gratification. I mean, especially now with,
Yeah.
Chat GPT and all this AI stuff coming out, it's, you have a question, bang, you have it instantly. But sometimes you have to go through that creative process and it takes a while to do that. So being able to hone them in and keep them focused on that with either, the brainstorming, storyboarding, whatever it may be, to keep them in line, I think that's something we all can help them work on.
I love that you touched on that, because I think that weaves in nicely with kind of defining what design thinking is. And I wanted to move to that piece next, is that it's an iterative process and it's really kind of the creative brainstorming process in a more structured format. So Greg, if you could for us, I would love to hear, what are your thoughts on what design thinking is and why is this an important skill for your students?
Yeah, and I'm fortunate because I come right from the design world and I teach mainly design. So, so this is something that I try to encompass every single day. But in terms of design thinking is, first of all, what is the real problem? And, whether it's a design problem for a product or a poster or, just solving any problem. I think the main thing is drilling down, what's the problem and what can I do to solve that? One thing that I think that, especially at students for the high school age, is I don't care if they're introverts or extroverts, they want to solve problems. They want to be heard. They want to, they want to be empowered, and it's our job to empower them. And using the design process, whether it's through, verbally brainstorming or through, doing storyboarding on your own, or take whatever method you use for that, we have to be able to unleash that creativity to let them solve that problem. But, giving that, I don't know, stronger purpose or stronger meaning to the brainstorming process to solve a problem, I think is imperative.
Well, and I think it almost forces, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, it almost forces us as educators to be able to say, what is the purpose? What are we wanting them to be able to get out of this? What's the problem that they're needing to solve, so that we can communicate that effectively, because that, of course, impacts the storyboarding, the prototyping, all of those other pieces of the design process that are so important. So thank you for that, Greg. I think that's wonderful. And Katie, I wanted to come to you next from a graphic design perspective. What is design thinking for you, and why is this an important skill for your students?
Honestly, it's very similar to Greg's, and the design, in terms of graphic design, I think it has a lot to do with the problem solving process. Like you said, you're trying to narrow down exactly what they're looking for and then break it down that way. And ultimately, sometimes you have a lot of blueprints and you have a lot of ideas in the beginning, and I have kids sketch them out. What are your ideas? Write them down, because sometimes you tend to forget, or you overanalyze the one thing, or you might not look at it as another angle. So write down all of your ideas, then narrow them down and branch it out and try to figure out what you want to do with it. What colors you want to use? Why do you want to use them? What are you trying to solve? What do you want included on your flyer? What's important? What needs to be emphasized more than something else? What are you trying to get? What's your ultimate goal of your design? Because a lot of times, sometimes you design it and you don't realize you didn't hit the actual goal that you want to do. Like, what was the point of your flyer? Oh, it's to get attention for this. Okay, well, it looks like you're emphasizing something else. You know what I mean? Like, and also, I think something I didn't mention about creativity was that I've been really trying to emphasize, by the way, with my students is peer reviewing. And I don't feel like we do it enough. And I started doing that and it's been working really well. So having kids learn how to give constructive criticism and give peer reviews is really important for them around the board. And peer reviewing yourself. Yes, teachers come and help all the time, but have students do it to each other. Also have them do group work. A lot of times in the design process, you work in groups, you work in teams. So getting a group perspective on it is always good. You realize from getting peer reviews that you don't think about certain things that other people might. So it helps your design process. And I think that's really important for kids too.
I have some notes here from our previous conversations as well, and you tied in really well, Katie, with something that I wanted to call out specifically, is that design thinking and the creative process is about the people that you're working with and not just the problem that you're trying to solve. And so I think having that collaborative team effort is so important, because a lot of times we get into our own heads, to your point that you made earlier about this is how I think that this should be done. But when you have someone else's opinion bought in, it can take you down a new path. And so I think that design thinking and that collaborative process really brings in a result that's better than what you could kind of make on your own. So I love that you emphasize that as well. I wanted to talk about the kind of the design thinking process in general and how you're planning on implementing this with your students. And I know that the Intuit design thinking, the design for delight, is a little bit different. There's different design processes out there, but how do you plan on leveraging these types of skills with your students in the classroom? And Katie, we'll come to you first.
I think, especially with the Design for Delight certification, the program as a whole, I think this would be a really great program to implement before you start designing. So kids understand the structure of how something is supposed to be done before they dive right into it. So, and that's where, honestly, where my head was going for the Design for Delight for my students, having them understand the problem solving process and the design process and how it needs to be implemented, then they might be able to analyze a project better than they would if they didn't have that. And I think ultimately that's it. I think having a software where the kids actually understand the whole process and the story and what they're trying to solve and what they should be emphasizing on and what the overall structure, how it needs to be, the more organized you are, the better it's going to turn out ultimately.
Yeah.
And that's with a lot of things, but especially design, like having it stuck. You don't want to jump 2 spaces ahead and then not be where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And also I think Intuit for Design for Delight also mentions a lot with customer service. And being in design, you are in customer service quite a bit. You have to work with the client and you have to make sure that they're happy. So there's a lot of communication with it. And I think it also ties into design, and you need to be organized, because if a client wants to ask you what's going on in the future, you have to be able to tell them exactly where you are. And I think that's really important, the design process. So.
Well, going back to that piece that we were talking about earlier, it's about a lot of those soft skills, communication, collaboration. It's being able to communicate not just with your internal team, but externally with the people that you're serving, what they need, where you are in that process. So I agree. I think that's something super important. And Greg, I know you've been nodding your head that that's something that your students in their designs also need to be going through, kind of the iterative process. So how are you planning on using this with your students in the classroom?
Yeah, see, and just to reiterate, Katie, for framework and structure is everything, especially if you're in a design or a classroom environment where the design process isn't maybe as prevalent. This is a perfect program certification, not only for your students, but also for you to, get that design process down. But one thing that I really took away from it for my students is, we have those 3 different disciplines, architectural, mechanical, and animation. And the way that this program teaches you how to satisfy a customer or empower a customer is to, first of all, be empathetic with their problem. As a lot of times I'm giving a student a problem, like, okay, let's design this house for Mary and Joe and see what happens. But instead of let's design this house for Mary and Joe because they have XYZ needs, or design a product to fit a need because someone's feeling frustrated because something isn't working. We've all felt frustrated about a product, about a design, about something in our lives. I think connecting that empathy with a product is very powerful for students because it makes it personal, because we can all relate to some form of, something not working right, and we can solve that problem. Another piece of this program that I really took away that I've already started to implement with students is the storyboarding aspect of how to create designs. Quite honestly, full disclosure, for all the time I've been teaching so far, I've only used storyboarding with my animation students for video game design because that's what you have to do. I never thought about saying, okay, we have to create a product that we're going to, make a prototype out of, but let's make a storyboard out of it. That hits a different modality of learning and a different, that some people learn better, as we know, by reading, doing kinesthetic, whatever it may be. That connects with those kids who need to sketch things out. So having rapid prototypes, storyboarding, even like, back of napkin sketches, all that has value, and Design for Delight lets that be okay, and it becomes part of the process. So I think between those two things of it's going to help my students personally, just speaking for me, it's going to unleash them a little more in their creative process because of the empathy and because of the different modalities of getting their thoughts out.
And I think that is so important because not everyone, I mean, this is what we've been talking about. Collaboration is so crucial and important because not everyone approaches a problem the same way. So being able to go through kind of those almost pre-foundational steps, because we think of it as, okay, we're all at the problem, let's kind of take our approach to get to the solution, but it's that prerequisite of thinking it through and kind of storyboarding, writing it out, brainstorming it, that is so important to be able to get everyone on the same page for the approach that you're going to take. And I know in our conversations previously, we talked about, well, this is something that as an educator, I don't just want to apply with my students. I want to approach my own curriculum with kind of a design thinking mindset. So I wanted to talk about kind of that element of it. How are you planning on using design thinking as an educator? And Greg, we'll come to you first.
Yeah, going through that. And one thing, coming from industry and then into the education world, I've always had this mindset of, I'm a provider, I have clients, I have to provide, provide those clients a service.
Yeah.
I've always thought that my students are my clients. They are expecting me to provide a service for them and to them, and I need to serve them. And I think, as you get caught up in curriculum planning and everything else that goes around to being an educator, it's a little easy to lose sight of, wait, these are my clients. So with that, I feel like I've always been empathetic to my students, but now I'm going to be a little more empathetic of how the design process works for them. And actually, like Katie said, using some of that peer review and self-reflection of, okay, what am I doing? And the Design for Delight did a great job of doing different ways to measure your hypothesis of the design. And kind of taking a step back and seeing if the process of teaching them correctly is working and making changes on the fly if I need it. So this program, it's great for students, but it's awesome for educators. It's helped me already find or look at education from a different light and just kind of reaffirm some of the core values, which is why I became a teacher.
Yeah. Well, I think both of you have brought that perspective in our conversations that we've had separately, that the students are the clients that you're serving. And so when you think about your curriculum in kind of a design thinking framework, it can take a different approach than maybe other educators would take. So Katie, I wanted to get your thoughts. How are you implementing and using design thinking in your classroom, not just with your students, but as reflection for the curriculum and the approach that you take teaching?
I mean, honestly, the first thing I thought of when I actually took the exam and I took the course was about being more organized, about being structured better in terms of not just myself, but if my structure is better with how I even deliver my curriculum, then it's going to be easier for my kids. And that's something that I've kind of learned over the years with teaching. And I love that Greg said that about me. clients, because I feel the same way. I was in sales for years, or choose to be in our classes and a teacher, and I love implementing these without design thinking process. You can use this for just about anything. So not only just how you plan and structure your assignments, but how you plan and structure your whole curriculum, the whole year, how you tackle just about anything in class when it comes to projects, like work-based learning projects, anything. And I'm very grateful to have learned this material, and I'm really excited about implementing it with my class. So all I can say is that the longer that I've been teaching is the more that better you're organized, the more you're structured, the more you have everything in place, the more it's like a domino effect. Everything falls into place, and you'll see it with you, you'll see it with your kids, and having your assignments structured a little bit better to maybe, like he said, to make sure that to have accommodations met too. So if a student goes this way, you know exactly how to tackle it. And especially in the design thinking process, you have to be planned for multiple scenarios. You can't be planned for one. I think as a teacher, you're planned for 20, but it's just, but I love that. I love that it's planning a little more. No teacher can have too much structure. Let's just say it that way.
Yeah. Well, look, the structure gives you the opportunity to be able to work kind of, I think, on the fly and to use that creativity, right? Because if I have all of these scenarios, to your point, planned out in advance, I know how I'm going to respond. I have the opportunity to approach it in a different way if we feel things going maybe a little bit sideways, or if we wanted to take a different route. So I think that that's really valuable advice. And I wanted to get your final thoughts, Katie. Any other advice that you would share for educators looking to learn more about design thinking?
So design thinking, the way I've structured my curriculum is that I have my students take, for example, Adobe Photoshop as their semester exam. And I plan assignments and curriculum throughout the whole semester. So I shift it. I have students learn something, and then we actually implement it with the project. So it's a lot of project-based learning. And I really highly recommend that, because the design approach, yes, you need to have some structure to it, but kids need to dive in and create things themselves. You can't expect a student to know how to do Adobe Photoshop without actually doing it themselves.
Yeah.
So that's one of my key little wins for me this year. It's getting better and better every year, having kids implement what they learned, having them explain why they chose to design a structure that way. I think that's also key. Peer reviews, I plan on implementing more next year. Having kids peer review each other's work, I think you need that. I think you need to get some feedback. I get feedback to this day for a lot of things that I even do. It's important. You might get a different light on something that you never saw before. That's why group work is so great. But that's something that I would really like to share, is that project-based learning is really, and I really believe in that.
Yeah. Well, I think that that is a huge part of the design process, that rapid prototyping. You can't just learn all of it up front and then make one big thing at the end. It has to be making little things, I think, along the way to be able to improve the skill sets. I think that's really valuable advice. Greg, any thoughts from you on advice that you would share about design thinking, either for your students or for other educators?
For students, empower them. Just give them a purpose. Like Katie, I love doing project-based learning. One thing now that we're out of the pandemic phase is doing community service, getting out there and finding real clients that have real problems and help solve them. So, for example, my senior class this year, for part of their senior projects, we linked down with 2 community service projects. They're very ambitious projects, and I wasn't expecting what they produced. Sometimes you just have to give them a problem, give them the process, and get out of the way. Really be that guide on the side, and just let them flourish with what they know. Students, they know more than you think they know every single time. So I think that's the biggest takeaway for the student aspect of it. For educators, it's really just like, I'm going to read what Katie said: get organized, get your process down. If you are a chocolate mess, your class is going to be a chocolate mess, and all the projects are going to follow suit. So the more organized you can be using this design process, the better off your classroom is going to run, and the better your students are going to do.
Thank you so much, both of you, for all that you've shared this afternoon. I know that we could continue this conversation for a while, and I just wanted to call out maybe a couple things, and if anyone has any questions, they're welcome to drop those into the chat. But before we close out, I wanted to just mention a few housekeeping items. First, as part of this Certified Academy Design program, we do offer a boot camp extension. So teachers who are interested in testing out the certification, I know, for example, Greg and Katie, this was a new program for both of you. So if you're looking to test out Intuit's Design for Delight, Innovator Certification, or even Adobe or Autodesk, you're welcome to do that as part of this program. So if you're interested and haven't enrolled in the boot camp and want to learn a little bit more, you can email us at certifiedacademy@pearson.com. And you can also read some more details about the boot camp program. And I just dropped the link there into the chat. The second announcement is that this is ultimately a big buildup for us to our annual Certified Educators Conference. It's going to be happening next month. I can't believe we're already able to say that, in June, the 26th through the 28th in Orlando, Florida. So if you want to kind of add to this conversation, learn a little bit more, I know Greg and Katie will both be there. We have some fabulous educators and presenters who are going to be sharing their knowledge with us. So this is a wonderful opportunity to continue that conversation of how to improve your teaching skills in the classroom. So if you haven't registered for that, we would love to have you there with us. I'll drop the link to the conference website here in the chat as well, certified.certiport.com. And then the third announcement is that next week we'll be hosting another session. We're coming to kind of the tail end of these webinars before we all hopefully take a little bit of a break for the summer. But we'll be collaborating with some video design educators to talk about how you can help students learn both Adobe Premiere Pro and Adobe After Effects. So that's the same link that I dropped into the chat, the blog link. Join us for Certified Academy Design. So we would love to see you all there. Thank you so much, Greg and Katie, for all of the expertise that you've shared with us today. We look forward to seeing you guys next month, and we look forward to seeing hopefully everyone who's here in this session again next week. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.